Some people have the question that why is a four-wheel drive actually required? Well, to answer that, let's take this scenario. The vehicle has gotten stuck in the off-road territory. You try to accelerate in the best possible way, but what's happening is the drive wheels are simply slipping away as there is no grip available. The vehicle is not moving ahead. Now, why is this happening? Let's discuss this closely. When we talk about slip with respect to automobiles, the wheel could be spinning on the spot vigorously without causing the vehicle to move ahead. Like, when the wheel rotates at a faster rate as compared to the speed of the vehicle, then we know that slip is occurring. What we come across normally is a car which is, say, stuck in a mucky patch. Here, you can clearly see the wheel is actually slipping or skidding, kicking a lot of muck or slush with a slipping tire. But the vehicle is not moving at all. It is stuck over there. If you check out what's happening over here, there is slip taking place. Slip has two kinds, one with less traction and the other with no traction. No traction means whatever torque is going to the wheels is in excess, because of which the tires are not able to grip the road surface, which means all the power is getting lost. Hence it has no traction at all. Less traction can be a partial slip, where you have some power actually contributing to the traction and the rest is getting lost because of the slip which is occurring. Now we can check out the power flow in a vehicle. This is the schematic diagram of a normal rear wheel drive car. That's the engine which manufactures the power. So, here we have chemical energy getting converted into mechanical energy, and via the crankshaft, we are supplying this power to the gearbox. In the gearbox, we are able to manipulate the torque, that is, we can either step up or step down the torque produced. From the gearbox, the torque is sent to the differential via the propeller shaft. The rear differential splits the torque to the two individual wheels at the rear, which is the rear right wheel and the rear left wheel, and the vehicle propels forward. This is what happens when it comes to power flow in the rear wheel drive vehicle. Let's take an example. Here, what we are calculating is the available torque at each wheel. Considering that 250 Nm of torque is produced by the engine, and let's say that the gearbox is engaged in the first gear, and let's take the first gear ratio as 4:1. We are taking numbers like 250 and 4 just to make the calculations look simple. When the first gear ratio is 4:1, 250 Nm torque which the engine produces gets multiplied by 4. This way we have 1000 Nm torque which is going towards the rear from the gearbox. Considering the final drive of the axle to be 3:1, you will have another multiplication of 3 to this torque. This will make the torque value shoot up 3 times to 3000 Nm. When the vehicle is moving straight, the differential would split it equally and you will have 1500 Nm at each wheel. So this is the torque available at each wheel when the engine produces 250 Nm of torque and the gearbox is set at the first gear. Keeping this in mind, let's move ahead. Now we're going to talk about traction of a tire. Now, what is traction? Let's keep it simple. Traction is the adhesive friction of a body on some surface, as a wheel on a wheel or a tire on a road. In layman's terms, more traction means more grip and less traction means less grip. Why is this required? Well, as we just discussed, when we talk about traction, we are actually talking about the two surfaces in contact and the nature of the surfaces, which are the factors that would be involved in this topic. First is coefficient of friction. When we talk about frictional force, this coefficient comes into play, and mu is the parameter which depends on the two surfaces in contact, which is the nature of the two surfaces in contact. So theoretically, when you have a perfect surface where there is full traction and no losses, you will have a coefficient of friction of 1. However, practically it's not possible. For the simple calculations, we'll be calculating it based on 1. Let's move ahead. Next parameter is W, which is load per wheel. For load per wheel, let's consider the vehicle weight. The laden weight could be, say, 2 tons, that is 2000 kilos. So you have the load at each wheel as 500 kgs. We consider that the weight is equally distributed along the vehicle. So we have 500 kilos. Taking G, which is the acceleration due to gravity, as 9.8. For a present calculation, let's assume the value of G to be 10. We have 5000 Newton weight force at each wheel. R is the dynamic rolling radius of the wheel, which means it is the distance between the center of the wheel to the periphery of the wheel when this wheel is in the dynamic condition, that is in the rolling condition. Let us take R to be 0.4 meter. Now we are taking these values to do our calculations. We are considering mu to be 1 here, W to be 5000 newtons and R as 0.4 meter. We are calculating something called as wheel slip torque, which is the product of these three parameters, that is mu, W and R. On substituting these values, we get the result as 2000 Newton meter, which is the wheel slip torque. Now, the question which pops up is, what is wheel slip torque? From where did this particular term arise? This is the max torque that can be transferred by the wheel without slipping, or the torque carrying capacity of the tire. For this particular calculation, we have 2000 Newton meter. Digging into a little more details of the coefficients, that is mu, let's see how mu varies depending upon the surfaces in contact. While driving on tarmac, we have the value of mu as 0.921. This is just an approximate value. Here, we are considering the value as 1 for the purpose of ease of calculations. So, the wheel slip torque that is calculated over here is 2000 Newton meter. That is the maximum torque carrying capacity of the wheel. In conditions which are wet, snowy and muddy, here the value of the coefficient of friction will actually drop because there will be some slip which will occur. So here the value of mu can range between anything below 1. Let's consider this value to be around 0.4 to 0.6, which is a very low value. Considering 0.4 and with the same calculations, same dynamic rolling radius and same weight, the wheel slip torque actually turns out to be 800 Newton meter. Now going back to the schematic diagram, let's see what is traction, depending on the surface type. Consider this vehicle on tarmac. Here we have 250 Newton meter torque produced by the engine, and the torque value going by the prop shaft turns out to be 1000 Newton meter. On tarmac, we have a value of 2000 Newton meter that can be transmitted by the tire without slipping. That is wheel slip torque as we defined it, and we are giving actually 1500 Newton meter at each wheel. Now 1500 Newton meter is within this barrier, so there will be no slip at all. We can easily take 1500 Newton meter in which there would be no losses theoretically. Let's see a condition in which, say, the surface is not tarmac. Say it is snow. In that case, the calculation would be 800 Newton meter considering mu to be 0.4. Now 800 Newton meter is the wheel slip torque for these two surfaces which are in contact. So anything which clocks above 800 Newton meter, the tire starts slipping. But as said earlier, we are providing 1500 Newton meter, so the tire is bound to slip because it exceeds the torque limits. Now this is the problem. We are providing 1500 Newton meter to each wheel, but we are losing 700 Newton meter of torque, and in the process you slowly start losing everything once the wheel starts slipping. So this results in wheel slip. So what is the solution? Can we tweak the torque flow and utilize the lost torque? Say we don't give 1500 Newton meter to each wheel. We give only 750 Newton meter. Well, this 750 Newton meter is within the limits. It's within the max limit for snow, so there will be no wheel slip. Now let's move backwards. 750 Newton meter means we have 1500 Newton meter at the differential and we have 500 Newton meter at the propeller shaft. So the remaining 500 Newton meter, let's take it to the front. A mechanism would be located here. You have another prop shaft which carries the remaining 500 Newton meter to the front. Another front differential would multiply it by 3 and we'll be having 750 Newton meter at each wheel. So here, even if one wheel starts slipping, you still have torque available at all 4 wheels. This is the basic principle of 4-wheel drive. So let's bring the lost torque from the rear and bring it to the front so that we have torque at all the wheels. Now this image is what we just discussed. These are the two mechanisms. First mechanism, that is the first component that we'll talk about, is the transfer box, which actually helps to bring the drive to the front. The next is the front differential. Then you have a shifting mechanism by which you can shift between 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive. Now the shifting could happen in many different ways, like it could be either electric or mechanical. So this is primarily a rear-wheel drive type of vehicle with a 4-wheel drive mechanism. This, as you see, is primarily a front-wheel drive vehicle with a 4-wheel drive mechanism. If you see this arrangement, it is similar to the XUV 500. Here you can see that the engine is transversely mounted. We have a transaxle, then PTU, which is the power takeoff unit, which sends torque to the rear differential via the propeller shaft, which in turn provides torque to both the rear wheels. We saw the two different types of 4-wheel drive mechanisms. One was the rear-wheel drive type and the other was a front-wheel drive type. During off-roading circumstances, we can transfer the torque to 4 wheels for better performance. 2-wheel drive cars have a tendency to get stuck in mucky patches, which could prove to be cumbersome. Hence, having a 4-wheel drive solves this issue. So it's cool to drive a 4-wheel drive car. From the Mahindra stable, we have 4-wheel drive variants available in the Scorpio, Bolero, Mahindra Thar, XUV 500's all-wheel drive W8 variant, Wexton MT and the Wexton 80.